So we're here to solve this Tapa variation I wrote with a theme rising up. You'll see the small numbers becoming large numbers, both wrapping around the left of the grid and even a little bit on this right of the grid, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One of the things that I was playing with this theme, which I do in a set of Tapa puzzles, is recognizing in a set of these spaces we have these channels, places that you might be able to like go through these to stay connected, but recognize that with the no 4 in a row rule, all these channels will quickly have to turn. And what that means is in a space like in this lower left corner, if we were trying to use the 3 to escape and exactly took this path up, we couldn't take another cell to get any further. And so where a lot of these low numbers should clue you in that you've got some constraints you probably can't be fulfilling. For instance, there's no way to use this cell, no way to use these cells. If we're taking something like this to fulfill that one clue, and coming out sort of like this, we're going to have an issue that both the clues won't allow it, but also the connectivity of more than 4 in a row won't allow it. So all of these spaces that are in this corner are pretty much dead at the start. I guess this cell can also be marked off. The rest are not yet dead. And I can show you for some of these, you may not sort of see like, yeah, why this is dead, but that just can't come through and across. And so there's a way to escape this lower left corner, which comes just through these cells, but it's got to use those around the 3. So everything that's not in those cells is what we can mark off as dead. And so that's where I get this for the lower left. And we can do something similar in the lower right. One of the things to see is that, again, this cell can't get out far enough because of the clue above, or get up fast enough because it will, again, shut off here. So this cell is dead. And then if we have to come around these spaces, notice that in wrapping around this one, we could do something like this. But again, we're in a case where we have a chute like this that now has to take all these cells, and it can't connect to a cell like this. And so again, we're going to have an issue of getting too much into the space. And so I think the original, I wrote this puzzle maybe a month or two ago, but the original thing I was trying to have solvers run into was think for themselves, how do I get into and out of this lower right corner, recognizing I must have a cell near this one. So I've got to find some path out. And this path out doesn't look too good. Let me sort of mark it in blue because we'd have to mark these off. So this doesn't look valid. And the path that uses these cells doesn't necessarily look good because it's going to have to take this, but then have an issue. And so the only path out must use these 2 cells. And we're going to figure out how we figure out the next ones after we mark in those 2. But that start of must using those 2 cells is fairly key. And we still need to get enough shaded bits around this. So notice that even if we use these 2 cells, we're not going to be taking this cell on the 1 and getting over to here. So the cell that's used around the 1 is on this top edge, and it's going to quickly be going up in some way. It actually, if you look here, we can't connect it to the top, and we can't come further to the right. So I guess we do know for sure it's these cells. But we still have to get more around this 1, 2 clue, which means this cell also will need to be shaded in all circumstances. And that just gives us, it may feel a little bit like a roughing of the grid to just work through it, but there are fairly narrow constraints with the lines as well as these channels, just based on the pattern of givens that force this as the star of the puzzle. We'll be able to work up the right side very quickly now. It looks like we finish out the 4 clue. This is the only place for 1 to go, and that's going to finish the 1, 5 clue. We're going to mark off the no 4 in a row rule, no 4 in a row rule. This is the 4 and 2 around this clue. This is coming up. This is coming up. We have a 1, 1, 2 here, and the thing to note is if we took this cell, we're going to quickly close off this by the clue and this by the 2 by 2 rule, so this is always off. Come up here. I didn't mark in yet, but we can now. These 3 around the 4 clue. We will need to get into and out of this corner, and one thing to see is that we can't take all of these cells, so for sure we're going to need to come somewhere through these cells to be going through the corner, or through these cells to be coming through the corner. So there's a key cell, which I think is this one, that if I mark this as unusable, we're going to need to get too far as a line or too much in the row. And so let's start by marking a cell like this as shaded. And then let's start to see how we're going to need to come around this upper right corner. One thing for sure is that these 2 cells must be used. Let's sort of again start with why not. If this is unshaded, we've got to put 4 in a row. if this is not shaded, we have to put 4 in a row. So seeing some of these effects will help us a bit. We look to really have both of the remaining options still possible here. Like this is a valid way to shade around this, but actually look at this. If I put that option in, we now make this 6 impossible to fill. So again, just considering the uses of cells, we could now, with some other things marked in the grid, mark that off. That puts this in, which for the no 4 in a row rule puts those cells marked off. That finishes this look of the 6, this look of the 4, the 1, 2 clue is shown. Still some options here, but let's start to mark some unused cells like these two. Can't put too much around those, can't put too much around these. We're going to have some different ways this plays out. So one of the things that can be next in the solution is to really now see how the full connection of the Tapa is going to be broken up by some different placements in different ways. And one thing that's a tricky edge to mark is impossible to use is this one right here, but this is almost an extension where we have our no 4 in a row rule. Every place we already have marked 2 cells in a shaded space, we know we can't extend further from them. And in some sense, marking off these zones is going to help us a bit. One reason it's going to help us a bit is for sure one of these 2 cells is shaded. We don't actually know if it's if this cell is marked, but notice that if this cell is marked based on this edge that's going to be unused to fulfill this 2 clue, the cell to the left is shaded. And when this comes in, we can now mark another edge with this mode. We've got 2 of 4 in a row marked off, and here's another kind of cell where we know we can't use both of those. And in marking that off, we know we're going to have to keep coming to the left here. And as we keep extending out, we're going to see that we get a space where this cell itself is pretty limited in how it extends through the grid. And you could see that maybe it comes through these cells, but notice immediately that shuts off this, and that's going to shut off the space for other things to go. And so a cell like this still has to be used to keep connected so that this space has a way to get out. But once I mark that in, I also now mark another set of edges that I can't come through, which is going to show me that the Tapa extends this way. And I can now mark another set of edges, which are going to show that the Tapa can't extend too far. So I get another cell like this cell that's got to be used. And this will play out a bit in different ways and hopefully get us through to the finish if we keep doing this kind of thinking. But just wanted to mark some of it into the grid because I think it's helpful at this stage to work through. I think the next intended deduction was really looking around this 2-3 clue and asking how do we complete what we're trying to do around the space. And a thing that will help again is that we've marked these 2 edges in, or sorry, these 2 cells shaded. It's marking this unusable space. For sure, we now have 2 different patterns we could be filling for the next cells in the grid. These 2 or these 2, we couldn't cross these with what gets shaded. And this set of cells around the 2-3 can't actually take the next 2 cells because that would be too large for this 2-3 clue in general. And so we're going to be getting a case where we're really pinning these cells up and over and can be thinking about what that means for how the overall flow of the Tapa goes. One thing that you could see, and maybe we can just use 2 colors now to mark this in, is in the case where blue is true, blue comes up here, takes these cells. In the case where red is true, takes these cells. Notice that if blue is true, it's going to mark this cell as unusable, mark these as unusable, and force this cell right here to be shaded. And so I'm in a case where in the blue scenario and in the red scenario, the same cell gets marked off. So I'll just mark that in, that I know that for sure is shaded. That will help me out because I can now mark more around this 3. These cells are never used. And that now means around this 4 clue, this cell right here is always used. And again, from the no 4 in a row rule, I can mark off this edge, which marks some more as unshaded, which marks more as shaded. These are actually all deductions that from straight Tapa you should probably be able to track in. I actually have now finished off what this looks like below, finished the 2 and the 3 clue. The cell is shaded for connectivity. That means that we've got the shape of the 3 clue here, and we've got to use this cell to come through. There's going to be a 2 cell clue that's on the other side of this, but it's not going to extend further than what we just marked in. For connectivity, we need to come up, but we've now come 3 cells, so this cell isn't usable. Around the 6, we've marked 1 cell as unused. The remaining unused cell is right next to it, so these are 5 cells that are used, and we've got some more cells that are the ends of a 3 in a row becoming a 4 in a row. That actually finishes this 2 up top. Marks this cell unusable around the 7, which will complete the 7 actually, and we've got another cell that would be part of 4 in a row, so those are all things we can mark in. We have what looks to be some pretty tricky connectivity that's going to be forcing things, and probably one zone to think about is around this clue where we could have either the red cell taken, but then really isolate the top and right of the grid. We couldn't take the next cells, one for a 2x2 rule and one for the no 4 in a row rule, or sort of come through these cells in blue. Both of those are going to be valid options, and in blue we'd actually take all these cells as shaded. Hopefully you can see we'd have 2 and 3, and then this has to potentially extend out. So there's some of this picture, and we can do a little bit of the same over on this side and think about, again, how do we get connectivity through the grid. There's a space where these cells could come in for sure, like there's no reason against it, or they may have to come over here. Notice that if I took this cell, I now couldn't take both of these to get to the top, or all 3 of these to get to the top. And so there's a connectivity break, which is the key thing to note at this stage of the puzzle to actually make the next logical step, which is you can't connect the lower left side to the upper left corner in any way. If this is used, we put a break in right here because of the no 4 in a row rule, and you can't use this channel. And because of that, the thing I'm intending you to see at this stage of the puzzle is this red cell is very bad to shade. If we shade it, we have now isolated this part of the Tapa that can't come down here to the rest of the Tapa, and that causes issues. So this is not part of the Tapa, but we still need to be getting the Tapa connected through. And so we have to come in like this. That's going to take this cell. Again, a no 4 in a row rule, so that comes over here. No 4 in a row rule, it comes in here. No 4 in a row rule. This is a no 2x2, comes over here. No 4 in a row rule, comes in here. Finally, we get a no 4 in a row rule that resolves this 4, and that's going to say that these cells do need to connect to the top, and that's the only way they can do it. So that finishes the puzzle out. But two different breakthrough or aha moments. The first at the very start of the grid was seeing how the lower left and lower right corners both fairly isolated, but this one clue specifically in this corner needs to have an escape through this side of the grid, and we saw that these 2 cells must be used for it. That gets us into the top of the grid, and the top of the grid we really get 2 sides of a Tapa, one that's really wrapping around the top edge, but we find we can't connect through the left edge, has to come through this 2-3 clue. And the setting of this single clue in the middle resolved the whole rest of the grid based on the no 4 in a row rule that this variation had. So some tricky steps to solve. Hopefully some of the steps you saw during your own solve, but if not this video, you should give some tips and tricks of what to do. And a key thing as I was setting the puzzle was very much marking off these edges when I had 2 of 4 cells shaded, particularly where I knew things couldn't connect, and that was forcing some of these small steps that we're working through. And if your notation was as deliberate as mine was in this video, and certainly when I was writing the puzzle, this would be how you'd really make quick progress through the solve. So we'll see you again soon.